they're up against the wall. No more wiggle room for these guys. If they lose, they're out.
Yeah, a very long road ahead for both of these players, as they did lose in the first round of today's matches, meaning that they cannot afford to take another loss and need to string together several match wins in a row before even making it to the finals to play against Brad Barkley.
That's right. So let's get underway here. We've got not quite a mirror match, 4-color mid-range versus Sultai mid-range. From a big picture perspective, Paul, which seat would you prefer to be in? Do you like the extra cards that you get for splash and white in this particular matchup?
I think Luca just took 2 damage for no reason. First of all, it looks like he's a little bit upset and he hit the oops button, as of course there's nothing you can do for 1 mana there. Representing the mystical dispute here. But yeah, I think the casters at the desk explained it fairly well. I think the Sultai deck has a little bit of an edge, but not by very much. I think one of the notable cards that Luca does have access to, because he's only 3 colors, is a land in the form of Castle Lochthwain. I think that's, if he does find that does play a pretty big role in the head-to-head, as the games do go pretty long. And if both players just get reasonable draws where they can answer each other's threats, all of a sudden you have a land in play that you can't interact with that can put you ahead on cards.
Saw that even with that slight misstep there from Luca in the early parts, he's had a really nice sequence since he did the kind of 1-2 punch that you really want, or in this case, the 2-1 punch of Growth Spiral into Thoughtseize. That took away a Hydrate Crisis, Paul.
Yeah, for the game 1, a lot of it is just hoping you don't draw your removal spells in the matchup, because they're not especially good. So you're really trying to prevent yourself from drawing cards like Fatal Push, Languish, Extinction Event, and just trying to find the action. After sideboard, things get a lot more interactive here, but wow, Luca really chaining these draws really, really well here with not only having access to a ton of ramp. I mean, he's got a 2-land edge right now, but also has that Thoughtseize to try to ensure an escape on the Uro, and make sure that Jan-Moritz Merkel might not have some kind of counter spell or removal spell to deal with it.
Yeah, you see he's got the Tails End in hand now. Luca knows about that, plus the Breeding Pool and the Languish. He does not know about the Hydrate Crisis or the other Breeding Pool in hand for Jan.
Yeah, and notice that Jan chose not to run out this Hydrate Crisis, keeping up the Tails End for the Uro, and also probably just looking to try to get a little bit more value off that Crisis, potentially waiting to make it into a 4/4 and draw 2 cards off of it.
Also, a card that might come into focus a little bit later or over the course of the match is Castle Lochthwain, which Jan-Moritz played on the last turn. That's a card that Luca won't have access to, right?
Yeah. It's just a land that you simply can't afford to play in a 4-color shell, where you're looking to fit a good amount of white sources in your deck so you can play Yasharn. So that is kind of the slight edge that some of the Sultai decks play. Jan-Moritz Merkel does have access to 1, and I've seen other lists play up to 2 copies of Castle Lochthwain. Gabriel Nassif, for example, did choose to submit 2, and that is the card that can give you a pretty significant edge in this head-to-head.
So all Uros all the time here for Luca Magni. He's going to crack this Fabled Passage, and I suppose we'll see this Thoughtseize go on the stack here.
Yeah, I mean, look at how many lands Luca has in play. He just drew Growth Spiral in what, 3 Uros?
3 Uros, yeah, and has just cast them. That's pretty much all Luke has done, is cast cards that let you put extra lands onto the battlefield and Thoughtseize.
And look at this, Luca trying to shut the door quickly here, taking the Tails End instead of the Hydrate Crisis, knowing that right now, Jan's Hydrate Crisis doesn't do a whole lot, right? You can play a 4-mana 2/2 and draw a card. So what's really important for Luca, because he's basically out of resources at this point, is to try to stick this Uro and get attacks in to generate that card advantage.
That's right. One of the big things you can look for in a matchup like this, and really any matchup where Uro's involved, is the first person to resolve an Uro from their graveyard, actually have it stay on the battlefield, often has a nearly insurmountable advantage if they get to start attacking with that card. We've all seen it before, and that's exactly what Luca's trying to set up here with the 3 copies of Uro in the yard.
Yeah. Now, Jan does have his own Uro in the sideboard, so it'll come down to how many cards he has in his graveyard to see if you can kind of match that. But typically the person who has the Uro first is the one who's largely favored because they're going to be the first person to actually get the attack in with the Uro.
That's right. Here comes Uro, Titan of Nature's Wrath on the stack. You can see that Luca is trying to keep another one of those in the yard if possible.
Yeah, and that's really important because people might be thinking, well, if they just kill it, I can get it back. But if you make the mistake of exiling all your Uros and then your opponent plays a spell such as Extinction Event, all of a sudden the Uro that you have in play gets exiled and you'll no longer have access to any Uros.
Okay, here it comes, Uro, Titan of Nature's Wrath. This one, though, is going to stay on the battlefield. And geez, there's the fourth one as well, Paul, going into hand here for Luca. Luca declining to play the Indotha Triumph here. He'd prefer to cycle it, it looks like.
Yeah, and keeping up the Watery Grave here, hoping to draw Thoughtseize.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, hey, and actually, Luca it also has a copy of Castle Lockthing, recognizing how important it is for the matchup, and choosing to play one copy in his deck. It is definitely a bigger cost for Luca to play a land like this in his deck, as he does need to fit white sources in for his Yosharns.
Apparently, just why not have it all, said Luca Magni, and it's going to just go for it. But in the meantime, your focus should be on Uro on the battlefield, because if that's where it stays and it gets to start attacking, and as you mentioned, oftentimes the first one to get to do it has the advantage, and that is going to be the case here for Luca. But Jan-Moritz did have enough cards in yard there to bring back Uro. And there's now a pair of Hydrate Krasis. Now, going back a few turns, Luca let one of those stay in hand to get ahead with Uro. Can that hold, as Jan-Moritz over the course of these next two turns could cast two Hydrate Krasis and really get out of hand? Well, speak of the devil, there's one for Luca.
Oh, man. This is huge. This is a 7/7. It's actually just the perfect card, right? Because now he can play a 7/7 Hydrate Krasis, which will mean that Jan actually can't get a good attack in with the Uro, as he'll just lose it in combat.
Oh, right. Of course, it can just sit there as a brick wall. In the meantime, he's going to attack with his own copy of Uro, saying, hey, let's trade off. I'm the one who's ahead here. And Jan-Moritz isn't going to be super happy to do that. So he's just going to take the 6 down to 14. And we're going to see a massive Hydrate Krasis here.
Yeah, and hitting a land off the Uro was also great because now Luca has a couple of options. He can just tap out entirely and make an 8/8, get that extra card now, or he can do it for 6 potentially and try to find maybe a removal spell of some sort. But it seems to me that you know it's probably just better to just try to get that extra card here.
There it is, an 8/8 Flying Trample Hydrate Krasis. And then past the turn, he drew Yahenni's Expertise as well as Thoughtseize and a couple of lands off of this Krasis. And a Thoughtseize off the top of the library is no good here for Jan-Moritz Merkel.
What's really interesting right now is now Jan can also play his own 7/7 Hydrate Krasis to kind of try to brick wall the Uro that's on Luca's side of the battlefield.
He'll just have to worry about the Krasis fighting and all that kind of stuff. Now, interestingly, Magni has not actually found a way to deal with the opposing creatures. So if that does come to fruition, it could be kind of interesting to see how the players maneuver. But here comes Uro, Titan of Nature's Wrath. Perhaps, wow, setting up for a Languish. Languish would get rid of the Krasis if it blocked, but it would also get rid of the other Krasis and your Uro would be gone?
Yeah.
Steep price to pay here.
Yeah, I mean, Jan could potentially just clear the entire board. He can, if Luca goes for the block here, then you can Languish and then pulse away the Uro. And interesting, Luca, it looks like he's just choosing to take it here and valuing just having a gigantic 8/8 body on the battlefield.
And look at this Maelstrom Pulse where both players have the same cards on board.
Yeah, and this is the downside, right, of playing a card like Maelstrom Pulse, as opposed to if you're the 4-color deck, where you get to play the Mythos of Nethroi, which is just a straight targeted removal spell. In the mirror, there are going to be plenty of instances where this Maelstrom Pulse is going to not be able to be a clean 1-for-1 removal spell.
That's right. So Jan-Moritz goes for, interestingly, the 6/6 Hydrate Krasis here. Looks like he left 1 mana up. Now, this does leave just enough to double block and trade for the big Krasis in the air or trade off for the Uro on the ground. But boy, a 7/7 would have let you keep one of those creatures and prevent Uro from attacking altogether. Oh,
Yeah,
he's drawn Fatal Push here, though.
right. So now he does have the ability to just Fatal Push the 8/8 Hydroid Crisis, and then kind of offer the trade here with the Uro, or maybe just be happy with just both Uros going back and forth, and just both players dropping haymaker after haymaker, and see who kind of ends up drawing the most relevant cards here.
Well, Money wants to see exactly what options are available to him. He's going to cycle Zagoth, Triumph, and find well an island. So nothing changing there. And even with all the extra card draw and stuff that Luca's gone through, I mean, this hand is not amazing. The fourth Uro plus a Thoughtseize and Henny's expertise plus a bunch of lands.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, it's extremely close, right? Both players just have a ton of mana in play, and both players have drawn plenty of cards with all those Hydroid Crises on the battlefield.
And you can see there's some similarities. Both have a Thoughtseize. Both have one of their kind of conditional sweepers.
But it seems to me that with all the cycling, Luca probably has plenty of cards in his graveyard to be able to escape Uro again from his graveyard.
Right, and we see over in Jan-Moritz Merkel's side, nothing.
Yeah. Now, the nice thing for Jan, if Luca does choose to go for an escape here, Jan could trade the Hydroid Crisis for the Uro, and then if it comes back, because his creature died, he can then Fatal Push it as a follow-up. Alternatively, if he wants to preserve his life total, he can just go for the clean block here and just use Fatal Push to deal with the 8/8 Hydroid Crisis, because right now, he doesn't have a really great answer for that gigantic flyer on the battlefield.
Right, and that 8/8 is going to make quick work of Jan-Moritz Merkel's life total if left unchecked. It's kind of a question of, do you want to deal with the thing that's killing you now or the thing that'll kill you later? And it looks like Jan-Moritz says, I'm just going to wait. This is interesting here, though. Luca gets to go for Thoughtseize and force the issue here. So he's going to sneak in an extra 8 damage here as a result of this Thoughtseize.
Yeah,
this is going to force the issue, right?
Right, yeah, and this is going to force Jan to go with the Fatal Push. Now he basically took the 8, which could have been prevented because of the great sequencing here by Luca. And now Luca's going to be able to escape Uro. Now, Jan-Moritz Merkel does have a Maelstrom Pulse. Wait, just kidding. Doesn't have a Maelstrom Pulse, so he doesn't have an immediate answer here to this escaped Uro, and is going to need to find something.
That's right. That graveyard gets filled up very quickly with all the cycling and cheap interactive cards that we see here. And here comes Uro Titan of Nature's Wrath. And that's been the name of the game here for Luca. This is like the 5th or 6th time that he's gotten the Uro triggers go on the stack. I mean, he drew all 4 of them.
Right. And now he can choose to Fatal Push the Uro if he wants. Now,
Definitely.
Jan probably has enough cards to be able to return it, but probably just...
I don't know. I think he had 0, so I think he's only got 2 or maybe 3. Yeah. But he may be able to work his way up there. Here comes Thoughtseize. Oh, and it was Extinction Event.
That was a nice draw.
Very nice answer for one of the 4 Uros that were drawn.
Yeah, this was nice because it does deal with the Uro in play. Now, of course, Luca, with all the cycling that he's been doing, and the 4 copies of Uro that he's drawn, and has a Zagoth Triumph here as well, probably will be able to escape it again. Keep in mind, he's probably... This Yohenni's expertise is not going to do much. If he needs that last additional card to put into his graveyard, he can just fire off that Yohenni's expertise to be able to escape the Uro that he has in his graveyard.
Right, and speaking of that, by the way, that was the 5th card needed. So Jan-Moritz went from 0 graveyard to just enough to escape Uro on his side, thanks to that Extinction Event hitting the graveyard. He's back down to 0, but he's got an Uro in play now.
Yeah, and this is... that's the first Nissa that we've seen. Both players have gone through like half their deck, and I mean, with all this mana available, I mean, there's so many different possibilities here for Luca, because you can slam Nissa, escape Uro potentially, although I don't see it being highlighted, but if you can escape the Uro and you have the Castle Locthwain, you have multiple cards you can draw that can potentially allow you to play an additional spell here.
Yeah, assuming that there's another basic left in the library, then the Fabled Passage could go get something. You don't even need a basic to get the Fabled Passage in the yard if that's the name of the game. And then, as you mentioned before, Yeheni's Expertise, you can just cast that to get it in the yard. It depends on how close Luca actually is to being able to escape Uro again.
Yeah, and actually, when you said assuming he has a chance to get a basic, I don't think he does. I think I'm taking a look at his list. He's got 2 islands, check. 2 forests, check. A swamp and a plains. They are. Does he have a plains? Yeah, he does. He has a plains in play as well. So I think he has all of his basics in play.
Well, you could just rip up a Fabled Passage if he needs the extra card in yard, I suppose. But that's kind of a bummer.
Or just cast that Yeheni's Expertise. Right? That'll kill the Hydrate Crisis, which would put some pressure on the Nissa. And now it looks like he can escape Uro.
Yes, indeed. That was the card needed. So here comes Uro. And boy, if Luca can find something amazing here, he could really run away with this game. You know, we've seen, oh, this is clever. He's going to sack the Fabled Passage for no land, but that will allow him to keep the other Uro in the graveyard just in case or for down the line. So all this mana available thanks to Nissa. The question is, does he find something to spend it on? Nope.
Oh,
that's actually enough to kill the opposing Uro. Oh, random. 2 Yeheni's Expertises gets the job done and takes out the opposing Uro. What a weird sequence here for Luca.
Yeah, but it worked out perfectly. He turned basically 2 of his dead cards into a way to get rid of an Uro.
You know, when you see those pop up, the first thought is like, well, that's not it. And it's like, it totally
going
was
straight to the sideboard.
Incredible. So now the pressure's back on Jan-Moritz Merkel to try to find a way to re-stabilize here. And I got to say, that is going to be very, very difficult against this board that Luca has established. Scavenging Ooze, where have you been all game? That could have made a huge difference even just a couple of turns ago, but way too late now. Okay, there's a breeding pool off the top, though.
Yeah, but now we got a Castle Lockthwain activation, an attack with Uro to draw cards. I mean,
yeah.
So, I mean, this is going to be really tough. Now, this Scavenging Ooze won't die, and Jan-Moritz Merkel does have access to a lot of mana, so he would be able to, you know, he's not dying this turn. He's going to be able to gain a bunch of life here. Oh, never mind. Wow.
Eliminate. Just like you drew it up for Luca.
All right. Well, this is 12 damage now.
Yeah, almost death.
The land fights for us.
And in comes the team, and there's
my goodness.
Crisis ball.
The hits keep coming.
Out. Yeah. Down to 1 goes Jan-Moritz Merkel, and it just seems like there's no way out. The Hydrate Crisis can reload the hand here for Luca Magni and put him in a position that is effectively unassailable in a matchup like this.
Yeah. Now, Luca's so far ahead, might want to just keep up some mana here. Maybe potentially 2 mana just to keep up the eliminate. Luca also has access to counter magic. Most of these lists do play a couple of copies of Ether Gust.
You see that Luca's going to go for the eliminate on the Scavenging Ooze before all that mana gets untapped from Jan-Moritz. And that's going to be game. We'll save you the time, my friend. Game number 1 goes to Luca Magni. His cat, or less, just taking a nap in the background there. But Luca, for him, that was a huge win. You know, they are in the elimination bracket now, and that means they have no more wiggle room as far as match losses go. So picking up that first game means that you have such a better chance to actually get through and continue, as you only have to win 1 of the next 2 games. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, though, we'll have game number 2 of Luca Magni versus Jan-Moritz Merkel. Don't go anywhere.
Hello, I am Taylor Ingvarson, and I am a world-building art director. Something that's really fun about making Magic is that there's a ton of opportunities to play around with different visuals and link things to the mechanic. And something that's super awesome with the MFDCs is that we actually get to show, or have the opportunity to show, a frame of animation. Something that we always want to do is like come up with an awesome idea that only works if we have like a bunch of frames to do it, but we usually just get the one card, the one image to sell what we're trying to get across. So something that's so exciting with the MFDCs is that we do get the opportunity to be able to tell a little bit more of a story, being able to show like 2 states of a particular place, creature, item, anything else that we could possibly come up with. So with Agadeem's Awakening in particular, it was really, really exciting to finally dive into the crypts of Agadeem itself, and then on the flip side, be able to show all the spirits bursting out of the same place. So those type of opportunities are really exciting for us to tackle. All right, so cards like Agadeem's Awakening give us the amazing opportunity to help show magic in motion, and we're so excited for everyone to see what we have coming next.
Go back to coverage here of the Zendikar Rising Championship. Players are just getting into sideboarding now, Paul. They had to consider the mirror when building both the main deck and the sideboard here, Paul, as this deck or versions of it is the most popular often deck in the field. What are the kind of cards that we look for here to break the mirror open?
Yeah, so some cards, and we've already seen it over the course of this weekend, some of the cards that are really important here are Narset. Narset is a card that comes out of the sideboard, and it's really, really good at shutting down Uro and Hydrate Crisis, right? Because now if you want to cast those cards, you're not going to be able to draw cards off the static from Narset. Shark Typhoon is also strong because it allows you to put pressure on your opponent at instant speed, and having a nice evasive flyer to be able to pressure said planeswalkers is also extremely important. Some decks also play cards like Scavenging Ooze in their sideboard, which is a really nice, effective way to be able to answer opposing Uros. As we saw in Game 1, Uro is extremely important in this matchup, and whoever gets to escape it more, or whoever has the Uro that sticks, a lot of the time ends up coming out ahead. So making sure you have that as a card to bring in is also quite strong. The really interesting thing to see from both of these players is how they're going to sideboard, because one would think, well, you know what? I mean, we're playing a matchup with a bunch of planeswalkers, and the only creature that matters is Uro. So, like, how much removal should I actually keep in? But then you have to think about Scavenging Ooze, because now you want to make sure that you have an answer for Scavenging Ooze as well, so that you can actually be able to escape the Uros that you have. That also will shift how players play back and forth. If you have multiple Uros, there might be some cases where, because you are afraid of your opponent playing a Scavenging Ooze and getting rid of your Uro, where you might wait till a later turn in the match where you can sequence Uro into escape on the same turn, so that you can actually escape the Uro and not have your opponent able to actually interact with that.
All right, well, let's get into game number 2 here. A Thoughtseize will kick things off for Jan-Moritz Merkel facing down. Looks like another Thoughtseize, an Eliminate, and a Growth Spiral with a bunch of lands. Jan is going to take away the opposing Thoughtseize and leave no turn 1 play here for Luca, who just has to play a land and pass the turn back. But Jan, kick things off with a swamp on the battlefield, and that, of course, means that Growth Spiral is not going to be hitting anytime soon. And speaking of Growth Spiral, that's also going to hit the graveyard here off back-to-back Thoughtseize from Jan. Pass the turn back over, and it is Ether Gust, Eliminate, and lands in hand for Luca. So he doesn't have much going on here.
Yeah, but I would much rather be in Luca's situation here. Jan had to mulligan Sure, he had a double Thoughtseize hand, but he doesn't have any more lands left in his hand.
Yikes, he didn't draw one for the turn either, Paul. No green mana available for Growth Spiral either, so he just has to pass the turn back. Another land off the top here for Luca, but I think we're going to start seeing these Triumphs get cycled as he passes the turn back over. There's a land off the top of the library for Jan. Unfortunately, it's Fabled Passage with only 3 lands, so that's going to have to wait to pick up the green mana that he needs.
Yeah, and that was really, really big because Jan cannot afford to just continue being behind on mana here. It's so important to continue to hit your land drops because one of the really big threats in the matchup is just Hydroid Krasis. And making sure that you hit your land drop so that you can cast a big Hydroid Krasis. If your opponent kills it or counters it, it doesn't really matter because you got those cards. So huge that he hit that, but he needs to continue chaining these lands together because right now Luca's looking to be in a much better position right.
Yeah, Luca's going to be the one who's significantly ahead on lands after this sequence is over. The Uro on the stack, and this is going to force the issue here from Jan.
Yeah, and I do like the counter here because right now you just cannot let Luca put himself in a position where he can double spell or play or just have that much of a mana edge right now. So I really do like the Mystical Dispute because he still has that Tail's End in hand, meaning that if Luca was just going to try to slam a Nissa here, he still has an answer for it.
Yeah, oftentimes you'll see the players hold on to the counters for when Uro comes out of the escape because you use up that resource of your graveyard, and then oftentimes it won't come back for a really long time. But here, Jan-Moritz just doesn't have the wiggle room to be able to do so. Another land hits the battlefield for Luca.
So this is interesting. Jan can actually Tail's End that, I think, as it is an activated ability, but he chose not to.
Oh, sure. Jan, I think, hoping to fire off Growth Spiral if unimpeded here and try to hit that land drop. There it is. Is there a land?
I wonder if Luca's considering the Ether Gust, but...
Definitely thought about it, but said that's fine. But the good news is the card draw clears the way for the land that was 2 cards deep, and there it is hitting the battlefield now for Jan-Moritz. And once again, Luca's just going to cycle another Triumph. Look, cycling Triumphs is a nice thing to have access to. It's a little slow, right? Luca hasn't really been able to do a whole lot this game thus far, but still, you know, one player's missing land drops and the other one cycling them away. You know where you'd rather be in that scenario.
Yeah. And
I do see, by the way, that Uro can come back here, but I don't think that Luca's interested in doing so, given that Jan-Moritz just keeps passing the turn back over and over and not doing anything else. You got to think, what could he have in his hand?
Yeah, and Jan-Moritz Merkel has a pretty heavy counterspell package in his sideboard. As you can see, there's a Mystical Dispute, Ether Gust, Tail's End, Disdainful Stroke. So you not, of course, Disdainful Stroke not being able to get the Uro, but you know that he likely has something there. So he's probably digging for his own copy of Negate or potentially Thoughtseize to be able to set this Uro up.
Both players' hands starting to look similar. You see Tail's End, Disdainful Stroke, Mystical Dispute, Ether Gust in hand for Jan, but also has 2 Planeswalkers with Fresca as well as Nissa when the time is right for those. In the meantime, boy, Luca is just cycling more. The 3rd time this game that he cycled a Triumph. He passes the turn back. There is land number 5, but it looks like Jan's going to play the patient game as well as Luca.
Yeah, and Luca actually chose to cycle instead of play a land that turn. And, you know, that Hydroid Krasis might be tempting to cast. However, if that gets countered and your opponent slams Nissa, untaps a Breeding Pool, and then keeps up a Disdainful Stroke or an Ether Gust, you're in a lot of trouble.
Very interesting game. Jan-Moritz was the one struggling for mana off of a mulligan, but now Luca has really just not found that much proactive action over the course of the game and has been forced to cycle a bunch of Triumphs, which takes up most of your turn.
Yeah, so he's got plenty of cards in his graveyard, so might not be that far away from trying to get to a second casting here of the Uro, right? As you can see here, he's going to have 2 cards left in his graveyard after this. but he does want to basically put some pressure on Jan, get him to use some of these counter spells.
Okay, there's Mystical Dispute to send it back. So this is starting to, you can see some good stuff.
Yeah, and Luca not interested. He does have the Eliminate here for the Scavenging Ooze, but not interested in letting the Scavenging Ooze resolve, as he does have that Uro in the graveyard.
Wow, both players on all spells in hand now. Luca's up 1 land drop over Jan, and here comes Narset. Now, this is a key card in the matchup. It's also a legendary card, which means that Tails End can target it. And that's going to counter it. That was huge.
And I think you're going to see an Ether Gust here again. And curious how many cards now this puts into Luca's graveyard. We got the Narset in the graveyard along with the Ether Gust, and there were 2 other cards. So I believe that would put him at 4 cards in graveyard. So if you can find another card to put into the graveyard, he could escape Uro next turn. So Thoughtseize would, of course, be an ideal draw here.
This has been a super interesting game, even though we've seen
never mind.
Battlefield.
Never mind, he has just enough.
Okay. Yeah, those Triumphs really did add up for that, as well as the Ether Gust. So here comes Uro on the stack once again.
And this is going to get Ether Gusted. So we're seeing players casting spells and using up all their counters. So, this Uro is not going to resolve. And curious to see now that Jan has exhausted most of his counter spells, if he's going to try to be a little more proactive here and start playing one of the 2 Planeswalkers he has in hand.
Yeah, I keep looking down at that Hydroid Crisis as well for Luca as a potential way to get a big threat on the battlefield and propel him into the late game. For now, though, he's going to put Uro on the bottom of the library and pass. Disdainful Stroke's going to have to hit this Nissa, and these players seem content to just continue to trade resources off. But now, Jan-Moritz is tapped out. Is it time for the big Hydroid Crisis? Yeah, it is. I think you could do it for, what, 5 here?
Yeah, and sizing is also important here, too. If you do it for 4, you could potentially draw Thoughtseize, right? You're not drawing an extra card. 5, in terms of sizing on how to deal with Planeswalkers, that doesn't change much either. So 4 might just be the better line here.
That's right. All right. Well, there was not a Thoughtseize in the top 2 cards. This does, however, actually, you could Growth Spiral here and try to Thoughtseize, couldn't you?
You could.
You have an untapped black mana source. You don't
really care about the Eliminate.
That is what you're going for.
I don't even need to be here. Marshall's just gonna call it. Look at that. Wow.
He actually found it, and it's really important that he did, because Vraska has the ability to kill the Hydroid Crisis. Now he gets to stay on the battlefield. Wow, that was sweet from Luca Magni.
Yeah, and if you notice, Luca actually prioritizing keeping that Hydroid Crisis in play and getting rid of the Vraska, not the Nissa who shakes the world. I think his plan was to use the Mythos of Nethroid to get the Nissa off the battlefield and try to win off this Hydroid Crisis. Additionally, I mean, he can also eliminate the land here.
And yeah, this is nasty. He's going to leave Jan-Moritz Merkel with just 4 lands on the battlefield, holding Disdainful Stroke and an unknown card to Luca. It's a Hydroid Crisis, which is nowhere near enough.
And I think you want to Mythos the Nissa here, because the disaster scenario here is if you let Jan untap and then he slams a Hydroid Crisis.
Yes, that's where you can actually let him have a chance to creep back in. So there goes Mythos. Your move, says Luca Magni, and not a whole lot to do here for Jan. He can basically cycle a Hydroid Crisis or now play a Narset, which would die immediately if activated.
Yeah, I mean, Luca has a 2-to-1 land advantage here.
Huge. So there's the Crisis. Oh, wow. And there's a Narset Parter of Fails now for Luca. That has to be on the list of cards he'd like to see. Let's see what he finds. And it's a Thoughtseize to take away the opposing Narset, if that's the name of the game here.
Yeah, and I think he's just going to sit back here, not attack, and just try to get another activation from the Narset.
And there's a Thoughtseize off the top for Jan. The perfect Thoughtseize is for Luca, and the worst possible for Jan. It's going to cost mana 2 life to get the bad news that it's just overgrown too many.
Oh my goodness.
Who shakes the world off the top. Boy, oh boy. It is good to be Luca Magni right now, finding everything right when he needs it, even a Mythos of Nethroi, in case there is something great for Jan-Moritz off the top of the library.
Yeah, however, Luca does know that Jan-Moritz Merkel has a Disdainful Stroke in hand, but so he's playing it patient. He's going to wait till he draws either a Negate or a Thoughtseize to get the stroke out of his hand first before running out this Nissa.
Yeah, that Nissa, though, is just, hovering over this board state. If Nissa hits the battlefield, it will close the door on this game very quickly. And let's also not forget that Jan-Moritz can't tap out of blue and colorless from now on out either, or Luca will just slam Nissa. It was a huge draw for him, no doubt about it. And he's going to continue to apply pressure to Jan-Moritz's life total here too. Scavenging Ooze.
Wow, okay, so this is aggressive.
He's really wanting to protect the Narset in play. We know how big this can be.
But now the Scavenging Ooze.
Right.
Now the Scavenging Ooze is going to get pretty big here, and currently Luca doesn't have an answer to that. I imagine there's a decent number of creatures in the graveyard.
Oh, but we see Ether Gust here as well. And this is with the shuffle on the stack.
Oh, wow. Very clever. Yes.
Wow. Super nice play there from Jan. Gonna snipe this. What's up?
Well, yeah, but now he's tapped out and he can't Disdainful Stroke.
You're right. So there's Nissa who shakes the world on the battlefield as opposed to in hand. And you got to figure that Luca is going to be able to take over from here.
Yeah,
it is interesting, though. The Scavenging Ooze still does good work.
Yeah, so Jan, I mean, if Jan can find a way to just kill Nissa here, I mean, he's right back in this.
Yeah.
So there's a handful of cards. Let's see, it probably has a Maelstrom Pulse or something like that. Not sure if he decided to keep that in.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, he needs to be able to find a way to deal with this Nissa, because I imagine the Scavenging Ooze can only grow so big, given that Luca's already escaped most of his graveyard.
Yeah, a couple of times. So there we go. Is there an answer? No, it's another Fabled Passage on top. Now, Jan likely will have another turn here, but this advantage from Nissa will get out of hand very, very quickly.
And Jan can't even attack.
No other cards. Oh, and there's Uro. At least a rebuy here. Smart here from Luca. If there's no more creatures in the yard, which there aren't, because otherwise we probably would have seen that Scavenging Ooze get in there. Now he can apply pressure in the lethal variety and force a trade here with Scavenging Ooze and then go for Uro.
Yeah. And just the ideal card too, because that just allows him to play around that Disdainful Stroke.
And there we go. The trade-off happens. Yeah, oh boy. Uro, Titan of Nature's Wrath on the stack, just under the Disdainful Stroke threshold. And I was going to say, let's see if Luca can find anything, but I don't think he needs anything.
No.
He picks up the victory, eliminating Jan-Moritz Merkel. And look at that. The cat's like, hey,
It's like,
I was having a battle.
what happened? Leave me alone.
Unreal. What a victory here for Luca Magni. A big win